Welcome to UX Evolved. I'm Eric Ellis. The last time Whitney Tolley joined us, she said something that hit a nerve. If designers keep seeing themselves as UI generators, they'll be replaced. A lot has happened since then. Figma MCP is real. Agentic workflows are real. Bugs that used to rot in the backlog are getting fixed in 15 minutes by an AI agent spinning up a local environment and opening a PR before you finish your coffee. So when I had a chance to bring Whitney back, our first ever returning guest, I wanted to know, has her definition of what designers own actually changed? Or has AI just made the stakes higher for what she already believed? Her answer? It's not about doing the same work faster. It's about questioning whether the work itself needed to exist the way it did. Whitney is design director at Cloudbeds. She's been in the thick of agentic product development, synthetic user research, and the creeping question that every design team is quietly asking right now: does Figma have a future? This one gets into territory we couldn't have touched 6 months ago. I'm glad she came back. Whitney, welcome back to UX Evolved. Whitney Tolley, welcome back.
Good to be back.
It's our first return guest on UX Evolved. I'm very excited. You should listen. This is new territory for me, but I loved going back to what we had discussed, and so much has changed even in the last few months. There's plenty to talk about. The last time you were here, you said something that really stuck with me, and you said, if designers keep seeing themselves as UI generators, they'll be replaced. I agree. But since then, has your definition of what a designer owns, like what they are responsible for in this increasingly AI agentic world, has it changed in your mind?
I do think that it's not so much that our definition has changed, it is that we've amplified certain areas that maybe were not as emphasized in the past. So we're finally getting to own the outcomes that we've been sold from all of these like UX programs that people have taken.
Right.
But then you enter into the job workforce where you're like, nope, you're just going to be generating UI screens and polishing things and fixing things that got shipped that shouldn't have been shipped in the first place. But now we finally, with the partnership of AI tools, we get to move more towards the ownership of those outcomes and those experiences that we wanted to shape in the first place.
I'm going to read between the lines, and I suspect that you're talking about what appears to be the design world starting to get into MCP servers, and particularly Figma MCP. There's this two-way dynamic. Claire Vaux did a great podcast. I'll link to it, between a internal Figma designer and an engineer working really two-way. That creativity is not isolated to any one department anymore. It's just that the engineer happened to be using code as their creative grounding point, and designers obviously were using a design tool. Is that what you mean when you're talking about kind of like owning outcomes more, or being able to own what's changing in a company?
Yeah, I feel like the steps that have been taken with Figma MCP advancement specifically, that's an area where it is helping us move out of that mode of polish and fix,
Yeah.
where we're typically living in Figma most of the day, polishing things, fixing issues. Figma MCP has really helped with speeding up the process of polish and fix, so that it allows us to free up our time to spend on some of those things that are more upstream. So the stuff that Figma MCP is not really helping you with, the user research aspect of things or validating or even
Right.
focusing on the right problem, but it's helping speed up the downstream of, okay, now that we understand the problem and we understand what's important for our users to fix, how do we quickly get this into a design that we can then have built?
What does that mean at the team level then? How does that shift partnerships or power dynamics between PMs and designers and engineers? I mean, you could kind of see, I guess, nirvana, or the grand state would be a fostering of collaboration we've always, to your point, we've always been told can happen, or we'd always wanted and never gotten. But the pessimist in me tells me, or the realist in me tells me, that's going to be quite messy.
Yeah, I've found when it comes to the power dynamics, and I assume you're talking about like power dynamics between engineering, front end engineering and design, because there can be a little bit of an overlap with AI now, enabling both of us to dabble in each other's worlds more. There could be some more competition. I know at Cloudbeds, we have a very collaborative culture. So AI and our processes have just amplified that more.
Mm.
So I'm actually finding that this new way of working is helping us be even more collaborative, so not competitive at all. And so our developers, they're able to do a lot more, just like developers can, or just like designers can. But what we're seeing, what's happening is that we're actually like meeting more in the middle than we ever have before. So not just partnering on design specs and design and the design system anymore. We're still doing those things, but now we're partnering on how do these systems, how can we make them better so that we're building better together. So one example of that is one of our developers, he built this workflow where you can assign a Jira ticket and it spins up an AI agent that creates a local environment, implements the fix, and has a PR ready within, say, 15, 20 minutes. So, what does that look like to us? Suddenly, things that used to get ignored, bugs that we would call out of, you guys ship something that doesn't quite match our specs, and we wish that you guys would fix that. Those things used to be just stuck in the backlog somewhere.
Right.
And now they're incredibly easy to address. So the cost of fixing things has dropped so much that the quality of our product can go up from there. So on the design side, the work that we're doing up front around user flows, even, we're now able to then provide that context into their QA systems so that their QA agents have better context to test not only does something work, but does it work the way that we intended for them to work.
I love
Does feel
that.
like there's a shift in power, but
Yeah.
it feels like we're operating in as one system finally.
Let's pull on that thread a little bit more. So I think what you're telling me is the things that the death by a thousand cuts that took up an inordinate amount of time that designers and engineers didn't want to do, and we're always encouraged really to bury because the capital rocks at the top of the roadmap were more important, and you can certainly argue that being true. Now has shifted to, well, we can do both. And if I'm a designer listening to this, and I've got some good experience behind my back, and I'm coming into work on a Monday morning, what does my week look like now? Like what could I do in this nirvana world where there's a good level of partnership, but we're partnering in a different way than we used to. That classic handover is doesn't seem to be nearly as important or needed, or maybe it's not there at all.
Yeah, I think what it looks like for us now more than ever is we have to lean into the foundations of good design, which is all about establishing trust. So we have to see ourselves as trust builders because as AI is going to be doing a lot more design and development implementation, there's going to be a lot of AI products that are out there that are just slop and it's going to be noise
Yeah.
and users are going to get overwhelmed really quickly. They're already starting to get overwhelmed with the amount of AI-slop content that's out there. So the role of design becomes creating clarity, shaping behavior, and building trust in the system. And trust comes down to just foundational skills that designers have had, but we need to amplify these now more than ever, which is having good taste, thoughtful prioritization, and clear communication, good storytelling, everything, these human skills that create shared understanding, those are the foundations of trust, and they're going to become more important and not less.
Right. AI is going to collapse the build cycle too. We've talked about that a little bit. Does that start to change what actually then gets greenlit? Like, can you make a case that things that may have fallen below the line historically can kind of come above the line? If for any other reason, we'll put quality aside for a moment and the need for storytelling, that's important. But let's just say, just for the sake of quantity, more can be done. Does prioritization then change because of that?
It does change, yes, and I think that's one of the biggest shifts that we're starting to now see is we can now design with context more than we had before, more than just coverage. So before, development was seen as extremely expensive. So you'd try to design something that solved everything at once because you didn't know if you'd get another chance to touch that particular
Yeah.
area, which usually meant that you ended up designing something that was a little bit more generalized than specific to the context in the first place. And a lot of times those experiences would feel a little bit bloated. But now, because it's so much faster to build and iterate, development isn't so expensive anymore. So we can actually be more specific. We can design for a particular user moment, a specific use case, maybe a real edge case that needed to be addressed. And we can actually ship to that specific context. So instead of asking, is this big enough to be doing in the first place, we're now
Yeah.
asking, is this valuable in this context? And that shift, it's way better for users because the product starts to feel more thoughtful instead of trying to be everything all at once.
And a way more fun job
It
to
does.
go
Yeah.
into every day than to be like, we're not going to have this discussion simply because it's too hard or takes too long.
And it makes it so much easier for you to nail that down to what does success look like. That would oftentimes get pretty muddied up whenever success is it got shipped and it solved all these things that we were hoping that would eventually make it into the product. But now we
Right.
can like really nail down what is the true success metric that we're trying to solve here.
All right. Now you're hitting on something that we've been talking about offline a little bit, and that is what is value. And you and I both know that good user-centered design best practices will apply human judgment into that. Is the definition of human judgment changing when it comes to doing user research? And if so, how?
Human judgment. I'm imagining you're touching upon the topic that's been brought up about using synthetic AI users versus real users and user testing.
That's it.
Yeah, I just recently started dabbling in this and I'm on the side of why not use it? Why not incorporate it if it's cheap and easy and can give you some really fast insights? Why not use it? But also do not rely only upon synthetic user testing. So with synthetic user testing that we've been doing is taking our personas that we've documented and our jobs to be done that we've documented and creating some synthetic AI representatives of those particular users. And that way, as we're running lean research experiments, we're having them test with those synthetic users to help flag things that probably our real users would have flagged as well. And we can quickly say within 5 minutes of running that test, see where things are likely to fail and make adjustments. So I wouldn't see it as a, hey, the synthetic users are giving us a green light, let's go ahead and ship it. It's more of, hey, our synthetic users are giving it the green light, so let's move forward to the more expensive layer of testing, which is with real human users, um, rather than having real human users likely flag things you could have caught earlier and made another revision or two on the prototype.
I wonder. My mind is spinning with use cases for applying synthetic research, which admittedly I have not gone into that realm. But we're talking agentic, so it's that's really what this is. It's kind of defining an agent that's going to go out and do some smoke testing for you before you go actually do real user testing. It almost like redefines the words heuristic analysis. Like, you'd always kind of go in there with a level of qualitative judgment as a designer going, I have a pretty good bet that fill in the blank. Value lies here. Conventional methods will work fine here. Standards will align there. And here you can almost like, I don't want to say skip it or not believe in it or not learn it, but to kind of like validate it without having to spend weeks at a time doing that validation. You're just like, all those like early hurdles you get out of the way before you go, I think I'm really onto something.
Yeah. And you mentioned the heuristic aspect of it because AI is really great at maybe looking at heuristics as a checklist and going through to just make sure, does maybe this design adhere to the documented best practices and the heuristics of good design? But there's still that human element that's needed that is just not there yet with AI, and I would be scared if it ever gets there. But that's what I'm finding is, like, on a recent project example where we're brought in with the vague goal of this project is not performing as we would like for it to be, and we don't understand why. Um, I was able to run it through an AI agent to just quickly flag any heuristic things that might be wrong with the product, and it created a report really fast and easy of
Yeah.
like, "Okay, here's the things design-wise where it's not adhering to, these standards that we should look at." And if I just use that alone, then I would miss out on a lot of the key insights that took place from actually witnessing some of our customer onboarding calls and watching them with my own eyes, listening with my own ears to see, hey, a transcript alone is going to give you the impression that everything's great with onboarding, the customer's fully understanding it. But what they're not hearing is things like algorithm aversion and the fear in people's voice. They may be saying, "Great, that looks good. Cool, okay." But they're not picking up on the context of this person is actually just saying that because they don't understand what questions to even ask and just want to move the call forward.
Yeah.
So there's certain elements that it hasn't yet replaced from good, just human judgment instinct, but it has helped speed up things like a heuristic evaluation.
The heuristic evaluation, I would imagine you would not have to do a whole lot of training. But I think what you're talking about with synthetic research really goes beyond heuristics. It really goes into value. Like if you're really training it on personas, then you almost put UX aside and you almost kind of look at it as, well, this is product management. You're really looking at whether the essence of what you're trying to get across to your cohort is worthwhile, right?
Yeah, yeah, and there's some blending I'm seeing a lot more with product management as well. So just like there's a lot of overlap with engineering and I design, there's still that overlap that we're amplifying between product management, defining what we're building. It's amplifying like where are partnerships? Where are we partnering today? And what value can we bring to those conversations? And how quickly can we get to insights and feedback?
So we're talking agentic, and I think what I'm finding is that most designers tend to be looking at agentic relatively similarly. I think we're being cut from the same cloth, whether we like it or not. This kind of human in the loop best practice so that agents don't run amok in your software, right? Like there's a level of risk aversion here. And I think everyone is also pretty on the same page of like slapping AI, slapping an LLM on top of your framework or ecosystem is also not good AI. It's just AI for AI's sake. I think we've kind of, those are two very sort of 2024, 2025 mores, and we've moved past it. Now we're in this world of agentic AI where systems are not just assisting, they're taking actions. And you're someone who's actively designing enterprise software. Where do you see UX, UI fitting in that world in the next year or two? Because to me, it's not, it doesn't feel clean to me. It doesn't feel clear cut. I think the tools and how we can leverage AI are starting to become more real, and we're starting to see good examples and use cases. But how agentic works inside of enterprise SaaS does not feel real yet to me.
Yeah, I think a lot about, and the way I've been framing this for myself is just coming back to that UX maturity model of how an organization has adopted UX and where do you fall? And what is it that you need to be doing in order to move up the UX maturity scale? With AI, it's even more important that we move our design teams up that maturity level because
Mm.
those who are stuck at that we're only seen as the polish and the craft layer is like the last video I was telling you. That's where AI is gonna replace those types of teams in that role. So you have to shift up into those more strategic positions. So in the next year, the next 2 years, those who still have UX departments and teams are going to be the ones who are in that more strategic seat at the table where they're spending more time influencing the outcomes and not just delivering the design static outputs. So looking at things like how can we drive activation, adoption, retention of the things we're
Yeah.
building, not just how are we building it, but what is the North Star metric we're trying to move, and being at that table to help with the ideas of how do we move that needle. And maybe it's parts of the design. And if it's parts of the design, we'll spin up a prototype, we'll test it, we'll get it into, if maybe it's still Figma at that time, maybe not. And then that will eventually get coded and shipped. But also where the other parts of the entire customer experience, the customer journey, where we can be evolving their experience beyond just the screen.
I'm gonna tangent that because you just hit on something that only in the last few months I've been thinking about. Does Figma go away in this new world? Like, is there going to be a place for Figma? By the way, I'm a huge fan. Like, anybody listening who's got Figma open, I've got Figma open right now. I've got multiple tabs going. Like, I'm using MCP server. Great tool, right? Great visualizations tool. It's collaborative. All the good things that you want out of a design tool finally manifested in Figma in the last, what, 10 years. But maybe not even that long. But what happens when to your point, and we just talked about it, you can collaborate two-way with an engineer and ideate in code, and really almost like the code kind of goes so far down the level of importance or need to manipulate that you really are going in there and like, hey, let's just use case this out. We just happen to be using code to do it rather than a whiteboarding tool.
I don't know. I'm also a big fan of Figma, but I've only been using Figma for a few years, and before that, it was Sketch was the hot new thing, and then
Right.
before that, we were all working in Adobe products. Back when AI meant Adobe Illustrator, but now it's a completely different acronym. Um, I don't know. I don't know if Figma will still have a place. I know it's bought itself a longer runway by having Figma MCP.
Yeah,
If it was not for Figma MCP, we would be in a place right now where as a team, we'd be forced to look at alternatives for how do
absolutely.
we communicate our design to developers that are using agentic coding agents. So,
Yeah,
I don't know, maybe it will. When you look at why we even created these static designs in the first place, it was all for the goal of being able to communicate the vision that we intend to ship. There may be a better way to communicate the vision we intend to ship that isn't Figma, but I love Figma. It's been great for the years I've been using it, and I really hope that they do continue to find a home and a place in it. I don't know. I also think about their business model. Like, what is going to happen
yeah,
to their business model when we don't need as many user seats as we have been giving out in the past? And that's been how they've been driving revenue. I know they're planning to charge for the MCP
just this
use.
month. Yeah,
Yeah.
just started in March of 2026 as this is being recorded. And in fact, we've been looking at our our usage and going, oh man, we need to either slow down or pony up because they are not cheap tokens. And no, you're right. I'm 100% with you. I not that we have gotten to the point yet where we've stopped designing in Figma. We are not there yet, at least not in the company that I'm working for right now. But I there's this like I hear it in other podcasts that people are just trying to figure out MCP server and experiment with it, and that may be true, but the learning curve is like this with it because there's really not a lot of technical sophistication needed for designers who know almost nothing about code. As long as you can prompt, you can figure this thing out. The connection's not that hard, and then once you start realizing that you can get to pretty good quality code and engineers are checking the boxes going, yeah, I can work with this. Yeah, it does make you wonder if Figma is not the source of truth, and I've never worked for a company where Figma has been the source of truth for anything other than maybe your design library, then what are you using it for? Yeah, great question. There's no answer here, but
Yeah, I don't know. It's also helped me start to open my eyes to just product strategy in general. Like a product that is so beloved as Figma, if it wasn't for Figma MCP, I would have been in a position of going from being a huge advocate for this brand to suddenly I have to search for alternatives. And it makes me think about our own products that we're designing of what is our
Right.
MCP agentic friendly strategy. And I think we all need to be thinking about that in the products that we're creating. Maybe not UX designers, we don't need to be thinking about that from a, like, product strategy standpoint. We need to be thinking about our products agent friendly because this is just the start. We're talking about agentic product development workflows, but there's gonna be agentic workflows in all types of industries.
Perhaps the UX nature of our heads actually play to our advantage in those kinds of questions, because UXers always kind of are looking across silos of companies where that's our very nature is to try to find connections to patterns. This just happens to be one of those patterns that we're seeing. I'm with you 100%. Unless you have a data moat, which you and I happen to be working for companies that have data moats, then you become a service. And hopefully Figma is not one of those, because I'd like to see them live on. Let's move on. I want to talk a little bit about you. You also mentioned last time you're hiring for comfort with ambiguity. And we touched on this a little bit. People who can stretch beyond their specialization. In an agentic world, does the job description change for a designer that you'd hire in 2027? Are there things that you're now? I couldn't even ask this question to you 5 months ago. I don't even know if I would have been able to ask you this, but now I'm like, oh my gosh, who are we hiring now?
We're hiring unicorns and nothing but unicorns. And that's how it feels. It does feel like we've always looked for unicorns, but we were trying to staff this large quantity of headcount available with nothing but unicorns, and there are just not enough of them out there. Now it's if you have that unicorn skill set of being someone who can operate across levels, someone who can think strategically, execute when needed, and communicate clearly, but more than anything, someone who can create shared understanding. If you are that unicorn, that's the future for you in this new AI-driven world, because in the future, ideas are cheap, and now ideas are cheap to implement as well because execution is faster. So what matters is, do people understand what we're building and why? And that's where great designers are gonna stand out.
The analogy I have is back in the day. This predates you. I think I'm dating myself. I'm a very old man now, I guess. But I can remember growing up in a very technological world where you could break open devices and see the guts, the internal mechanics of a computer, and swap out a modem. And that by that experimentation, you learned what that was all about, and you gained subject matter expertise. You became your, at least your family's IT guy as a result of that. We're growing up in a world now where our children need none of those skills. None of them apply unless you're really going into something very specialized. And as a result, the the utility, the usage of those tools goes from something very technological to something more creative. You're using an iPad in order to enhance your artistry, your art. I wonder if the same is going to happen in enterprise SaaS, where the makeup of these companies are not going to be these heavily specialized technologists. You'll have a little of that, but it's really going to go like, no, let's actually talk about the subject matter and the problems to be solved. And yeah, of course it'll get created. Why would it not get created? We can create it. We can do that in 2 days. The hard part is that, to your point, that shared understanding of problem, solution, latent and active needs.
Yeah, yeah, you bring up a really good point, which is like where does specialization fit into this future? Because I don't see it going away. Even in the agentic workflows that I've been building out so far, there are natural quality gate checkpoints that have to
Yeah.
happen that require the specialist who knows that function of the process the best to be the person to gut check if the AI is hallucinating, if it is maybe over-indexing on something that it misinterpreted. We're still gonna need some specialization, but we're gonna also need everyone to have that generalized skill set of being able to stretch beyond their own specialty area.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't have to learn at the expense of our users calling out frustrations and pain points if we have specialists who can catch that early.
Yeah, I'm always a little critical of fail fast in that regard, because to your point, like if you had shipped that, then if you have a mature leadership who's willing to say, okay, look, we're going to get to people are going to they're going to turn on this, and it's going to probably affect their bottom line. But if we start small enough, we'll eat that risk. Fair enough. Fail fast. And to me, like what you just introduced, that nuance is not fail fast, it's fail forward. Like let's learn the things that we already know. Perhaps that insight of context maybe didn't come from a designer. Maybe it came from somebody inside the company who's like, listen, I'm going to tell you right now, you're doing this wrong. Correct it, and you're going to have better luck, and you won't be dealing with some of that low hanging fruit as you're failing forward. Saying that the technology barrier lowers doesn't mean that the business acumen lowers. In fact, perhaps the business acumen goes up, and you're able to spend way more time asking those questions than going down into the weeds of, I'm not sure we can even do this. Good stuff.
Yeah.
All right. So let me ask you this last question here. Normally as I close episodes, I go with what would you like to redesign in the world, but because you're our inaugural returning guest, you get a special closing question. Since you've been on, what's the one thing that you've learned about working with AI that you wish you'd known when we first recorded together?
I feel like I was approaching it with the wrong problem and the wrong questions that I was hoping that it would help me address. I wish that I had questioned the process sooner. So at first, when I was using AI, I was using it to speed up the way that we already worked. But the bigger unlock for me has been realizing that we don't have to work that way at all anymore. Enterprises have always longed for their startup days of when they could be scrappier and they wish that they could operate more like they did when they were a startup, but now that
Yeah.
they're an enterprise, they have to
Yeah.
work
Hear that all
ways.
the time. Yeah.
But now with AI, I'm realizing, like, we actually can work more like that. So, instead of what I was approaching AI for in the past, which was like, how do I optimize basically a broken process in the first place? I'm approaching it now with, like, how can we rebuild this process entirely?
Love it. Whitney, thank you for agreeing to return. You're always welcome back, and let the agentic revolution begin. I'm sure we'll be looking into next year this time and going, laughing at ourselves.
The agents will be laughing with us.
That's true.
Bring me back.
Thanks so much, Whitney.